classic. Classic. Classic.
I'd like to return to the classics.
What's going on, boxing fans? Julian Williams here with The Distance. Got a video for you guys. This is classic fighter this week. I'm Jerry Quarry. Pretty much all week I've been watching a lot of Jerry Quarry fights, and just a video I'd like to make. Because, to be honest, I had like 1 or 2 fantasy matches with Jerry Quarry, but I think that he's a fighter that should be mentioned among some of the elites of the golden era. He's one of the best fighters to never win a championship. He was, because it was a great time in the heavyweight division. You had Muhammad Ali, you had Joe Frazier, you had a lot of great contenders. You had Oscar Bonavena. Sonny Liston was still a contender, but at the end of his career at the time. Chuck Wepner, Joe Bugner, just all kinds of fighters out there that were, George Foreman, George Chuvalo, Floyd Patterson at the end of his career. Just a lot of fighters out there, and not only that, but there was only like two belts at the time, the WBC and the WBA belt. So if it was an era where there were like 3 or 4 belts, 3 or 4 recognized belts, then I'm sure that Jerry Quarry probably could have became champion, especially in this type of era of boxing where there's like 4 or 5 different belts and there's a lot of politics and stuff like that. To be honest with you, he's probably one of the toughest heavyweights of all time, up there with Joe Frazier and George Chuvalo, one of the toughest heavyweights of all time. Had a good chin, could take punishment but also dish out punishment. Was a counter puncher, but he wasn't a patient counter puncher. He was that type of counter puncher that went for the knockout but also let it come to him. But his type of countering sometimes wasn't standing outside just waiting, because at times he was just impatient. He would just want to go in and he would try to dig into the body, and sometimes you get hit, but also he would return those punches. He was, if you hit him, the type of counter puncher that he was, if you hit him with like 1 or 2 good shots, he comes back at 3 or 4 better shots. He was tough as nails, as tough as they come. He always walked forward. He was able to get away without, using the jab most of the time. He was always in front of his opponent. He always, was always kind of cutting off the ring. Didn't give his opponents much room. But the thing with him was he blocked a lot of punches with his head. He blocked, most of the time he wasn't really thinking about defense. He was just thinking about, tagging his opponent right back after they hit him. And there's a video out there that's been circulating of Jerry Quarry later in his life before he died. Around the time he was, around the time he went to the Boxing Hall of Fame. And when you look at the video, he looks like a 75-year-old man, but really he was like 50. He was 50 years old, but he looked like a 75-year-old man. His marbles were just gone. He was gone. He barely remembered fighting his opponents like Frazier and Ali and Chuvalo and all these other opponents that he's faced over the years, and and didn't even know what was happening to him when he was being elected to the Hall of Fame. He couldn't do anything. He couldn't feed himself. He couldn't dress himself, which is sad. With the fighter with pugilistic dementia, but just overall, Jerry Quarry is probably one of the more exciting heavyweights to watch. And if you get bored by a heavyweight fight, this era, then just go to YouTube, look on ESPN Classic or wherever, and look at a Jerry Quarry fight, because because I think he's been a fight of the year a few times, or a fight of the year candidate. The Frazier fight in I think in 67 or 68 was fight of the year. And that was a great fight. He fought Ali twice, Frazier twice, and there was no quit in them. But the problem with a fighter that has no quit in them is they go on too long, and they go longer than they should. And even 4 years before he aged the way that he did, he was actually in a boxing match. I think it was I don't even remember where it was. I didn't look this up. I think it was in Utah somewhere. He was in a boxing match. You know, and the man shouldn't have been in the boxing ring past 1976 or 77. You know, after the fight with Norton, which is perhaps one of the best fights of all time, that's kind of hidden because I don't think anybody mentions, you know, Norton versus Quarry. You know, a lot of people are copping the nostalgia of the Rumble in the Jungle, the trilogy between Ali and Frazier, Frazier versus Foreman, Norton versus Ali. A lot of people are copping that aura, but this wasn't even a heavyweight championship fight. You know, there were two contenders going at it. It was Frazier versus Quarry, and the fight, you know, just didn't let down. Was not a letdown. It was probably one of the better heavyweight fights of the 70s, if not probably other than the Thriller Manila and the first Ali Frazier fight. It's probably one of the best. It's up there. It's up there with some of the better fights. You know, or even Foreman versus Jimmy Young in '77. It was, you know, like I said, it's up there. Both of them, you know, countering each other with a lot of punches, answering the shots back. Quarry eating Norton jabs, but also kind of finding a way to get inside. You know, just a great fight. That's a fight that most boxing fans should see. Quarry versus Norton. That's just the fight to see. So, anyway, rest in peace to excuse me, I bit my tongue there. Rest in peace to Jerry Quarry. Good fighter. Never won a championship. But in this era, he more than likely would be able to win a championship. But anyway, peeps, that was The Distance. Thanks for watching. Peace.
Once upon a time in the projects, yo, I damn near had to wreck a hoe. I knocked on the door. It's Ice Cube, come to pay a little visit to you. And what's up with them niggas in the parking lot? She said, fuck them, cause they get sparked a lot.